I apologize. I'm all right. I fear that I am a part of reality. Gosh, oh gosh. I'm terrified of reality. But whose fault is that? Is it a network? I don't think that's a network. Is it like that? That's not an inner person, is it? There was no network. There was no network. How could they find out? Just that. Then they discovered the same how we learnt about it on social media. When Tamar Braxton filed a lawsuit against her mother, Evelyn Braxton, rather than a stranger or business partner, many people stopped and said, "Wait, what?" And the reason for it was support for Michael Jr. amid extremely unsettling accusations that tore open wounds. Tamar had spent her entire life trying to mend. This was more than just a legal action. This was a private matter. This was sentimental. This was the culmination of decades of suffering. Tamar wasn't only filing paperwork when she made that action. "I feel betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect me," she said, and no one anticipated how vicious, convoluted, and tragic this tale would become when you truly examine the family dynamics at play. Let's slow this down, then. This is more than simply a lawsuit, so let's analyze it piece by piece. Silence, loyalty, family image, and what happens when a survivor feels abandoned once more are all topics covered. First of all, since our family is closer than that, I was really sad to learn about it through social media, and to have someone else tell us that story again. I can only speak for myself, though. I am the only one who can speak. However, it is incredibly depressing for someone else to inform me about something that happened to my own family, and as a family member, I would not have permitted that 911 call to occur in that manner. The public perceived Tamar Braxton's family as gifted, close-knit, and unshakable. Gospel roots, reality TV celebrity, 5 sisters, a mother who oversaw them, and an apparently strong heritage. However, Tamar has long claimed that things were not as they appeared inside that home. She was the youngest, the loudest, the most sentimental, and the one who was frequently written off as being excessive. And for a long time, that made it simple for people to overlook her suffering. Tamar faced difficulties that the cameras failed to properly document as the Braxtons became well known. Her connections were disorganized. Her marriages ended in divorce. Her mental state deteriorated. She repeatedly implied that something sinister from her early years followed her around. She eventually stopped making hints. Tamar disclosed in public that as a child, she endured years of abuse. Those who had access to her everyday life were within her home, not outside. She refrained from naming names. On camera, she did not point fingers. However, she was extremely clear about one thing. Strangers were not the source of the trauma. She also anticipated safety, understanding, and support when she eventually told the truth. Rather, she experienced disbelief, alienation, and pressure to remain silent for the sake of the family's reputation. Online strangers weren't the source of that pain. Her own blood was the source of it. How did the tape escape? Was the boyfriend the one who ended things? We don't know how it turned out. We simply know. We are as aware of the need for honesty as you are. The specifics of what happened prior to then are unknown to us. What transpired during the paramedics' presence is unknown to us. We don't know. All we know is what you people know. We are aware of what we heard during the 911 call. We heard everything on social media, as Trina mentioned. Media. After learning about it through a phone call from Trina in the early hours of the morning, I looked at social media and thought, how come this is everywhere and we don't know about this? Fast forward to the Michael Jr. situation, where Tamar's brother's son became the subject of grave accusations that rocked the family once more. Tamar discovered that history was repeating itself once more. It wasn't just the charges that broke her. It was the person who stood where after that. Tamar claims that Evelyn, her mother, chose to publicly support Michael Jr. in ways that, in her opinion, downplayed the seriousness of the issue and disregarded the suffering of survivors rather than doing so in private, or discreetly. This is where tomorrow's twist comes in. There was more to this than merely Michael Jr. This has to do with routines, protecting quiet, questioning victims, and prioritizing family loyalty over the truth. Watching the same dynamic that she had experienced as a youngster recur made her feel as though she was being re-traumatized. And she didn't keep quiet this time. Tamar brought a lawsuit against her mom. Give that some thought. A daughter is suing her mother. Not about contracts or money, but rather over what Tamar felt was betrayal and emotional damage associated with standing by someone who was accused of bad behavior. Well, I'm going to express this in a really direct and honest manner. We don't discuss Tamar's physical or mental well-being in Braxton Family Values Season 7. We discuss how it impacted us, but we don't deal with Tamar's harm, agony, or experience. We are unable to address that. Every time Tamar chooses to share her story, it is crucial that she do it in her own unique manner. We didn't address Tamar's condition or feelings in any manner. We just talked about how we felt when the issue occurred, as we are doing now, and how it affected us. Tamar didn't need to shout to get her point across. In a setting that consistently prioritizes silence over responsibility, I am unable to recover. Tamar believed that Evelyn's behavior wasn't impartial. They made a statement. A declaration that seemed to prioritize defending a male family member over admitting the harm done. This was particularly painful for someone who claimed to have spent her early years being ignored, blamed, or told to be silent. Conversely, Evelyn has consistently portrayed herself as the family's matriarch, guardian, and unifying force. From her perspective, she might have thought she was supporting her child and granddaughter, and refused to desert family despite unproven accusations. And that's where the tale gets excruciatingly convoluted, because it is possible for two things to exist simultaneously. A daughter may feel utterly devastated by that decision, while a mother may think she is defending her family. People would probably say, "What the hell," if you didn't respond to it. I mean, it's damned if you do. If you do or don't, it's damned. We would be insensitive if we remained silent. And now that we're seeing things, we're only talking about how it affected us, as Trina mentioned, and how we were affected in the situation because, from a medical standpoint, many doctors will tell you that it's crucial for the victim to understand how it affected your family and your loved ones and friends. It's crucial that kids understand it in order for them to perhaps gather themselves a bit more quickly. I'm simply stating that, it's terribly unjust. However, we do discuss how we felt when we learnt about it and how we experienced it. Additionally, I don't believe there was a problem with that. Supporting Michael Jr. seemed to Tamar to be a rejection of her reality. It required putting aside how extremely upsetting this circumstance was for her. It required repeating to her, "Your suffering comes second." That was the last straw for Tamar. She talked about how she felt that the family was constantly changing the story to hide unpleasant realities, and how she was called emotional, unstable, or challenging whenever she attempted to set limits. However, this is something that no one can overlook anymore. Tamar had previously come dangerously close to death. She has been honest about her essay attempts. She has talked about how years of unresolved pain nearly brought her to ruin. People should pay attention when she claims that the circumstances drove her to her breaking point. This takes us to even another level of suffering in this tale. How one of those attempts was discovered by her family. The Tamar sisters have discussed how they found out what had transpired in public. Not through a family gathering, not through a call from Tamar. They learnt about it through social media. The public suddenly found out before her own sisters did after a 911 call was leaked. Additionally, Tamar asserted that the show's footage was faked, citing the moment you all learnt about the effort. What do you think about that? I am aware that sometimes you have to act things out. Staged. But what was staged? I believe that was similar to how you all reacted when you learnt about her. Well, that was only a query. You're asking us the same question. We were asked this question by the producers. Hello, how did this make you feel? When you learnt about it, how did you feel? How come that isn't actually being reenacted? It's about sharing and responding to the question of how we felt and what we went through after learning about it. It was merely a query. It was not a reenactment. Her sisters conveyed their disappointment and disillusionment at learning about it on social media, instead of from family members. They discussed how things may have turned out differently if they had known at the time. They would have safeguarded her in a different way. Without it, the 911 call would not have gone public. And they solely blamed David, Tamar's lover at the moment. On the footage, they noted that while his girlfriend was leaving during a 911 call, he mentioned Bravo TV while discussing the network during a crisis. When their girlfriend was in trouble, they wondered, who does that? Additionally, they clarified that the family was not the source of the leak. It originated from a person close to Tamar, who was present at that particular occasion. However, this led to yet another challenging circumstance. Because Braxton family values addressed what transpired in Season 7. Not specifically about Tamar's experiences or mental health, but rather on the impact it had on the family. The sisters recorded their responses to discovering. When they found out what had happened, they talked about how they felt. And that did not sit well with Tamar. We didn't discuss Tamar and her circumstances in any way, shape, or form, therefore, it's unjust. That 911 call was not made by us. We didn't discuss Tamar's predicament with the media. We didn't publicly discuss Tamar's predicament other than the fact that we love her, support her, and stand by her side. Despite this, we are the ones being shunned even though we aren't the ones making things public in the media. It's totally unjust. It is totally unjust and unjustified. She accused the network of exploiting her pain for financial gain on social media. She claimed that even though she was no longer working for WETV, they continued to use her suffering for plot points. When her sisters learnt about the effort, she expressly referred to the video as faked. The sisters stood up for themselves. They clarified that they were not directly discussing Tamar's medical or emotional well-being. When the time came, they were merely discussing their feelings as family members. They were unable to represent Tamar. She told that story to whenever she felt like telling it. They were merely responding to inquiries about their personal experiences, emotions, and responses while highlighting the impractical situation they found themselves in. People would assume they didn't care for their sister if they remained silent on the broadcast. They were accused of taking advantage of her suffering if they addressed it. Whether you do or don't, it was condemned. Is it accurate to state that no one would have known anything if the recording hadn't been released by whoever did it? Her privacy might have been truly safeguarded, and she might have recovered on her own without our knowledge. Discuss it. Is it accurate to state that? Indeed. Because they didn't share Tamar's experience, they felt it was incredibly unfair to be attacked as a family for continuing to work and being shunned for it. They emphasized that the 911 call was not made by them. They kept Tamar's predicament a secret from the media. Other than expressing their love and support for her, they didn't talk about what was going on. However, they were the ones being shunned even though they made a good point and weren't the ones making things public in the media. Had the tape not been released by the person who leaked it, nobody would have been aware of it. It would have stayed confidential. Tamar could have healed on her own without anyone talking about it, and her privacy could have been preserved. Her family did not violate her privacy, rather, it was the person who released the tape so swiftly. However, Tamar felt betrayed once more, as she saw her family record a reality show, in which they talked about how they felt about her attempt at writing an essay, while she was attempting to get better. Her suffering seemed to be exploited for satisfaction. Similar to her well-being was secondary to family business. She was being treated more like a plot device than a human being once more. This was not a retaliation lawsuit. Desperation was the cause. The emotional consequences were severe when a woman said, "I cannot survive another moment of being dismissed." The family became even more divided. Communication deteriorated. Statements made in public seemed remote and icy. Fans were left to witness the breakdown of a once close family in real time. Tamar pulled away. She concentrated on treatment, on her son, and on reconstructing herself outside of the turmoil. However, the sorrow didn't simply go away, because you still love your mother even after you filed a lawsuit against her. Childhood memories are not erased by it. It doesn't make the yearning that things could have been different go away. Tamar stated that she desired recognition rather than rejection, or justifications. She wanted the woman who had grown up with her to take her suffering seriously. The fact that Tamar never demanded perfection may be the most tragic aspect of it all. She requested faith. Seeking compassion, for someone to at last say, "I hear you." Rather, she thought the message was to safeguard the family name at all costs. Tomorrow was not only emotionally impacted by this circumstance. It affected her capacity to trust, her relationships, and her work. She ran the risk of being called unstable once more each time she attempted to tell her truth. She was accused of destroying the family each time she stood up for herself. However, this is something that people frequently overlook. Speaking doesn't lead families to disintegrate. When someone resists, they disintegrate. To pay attention. Tomorrow's story compels a difficult discussion about how families respond to accusations of abuse, how frequently survivors are asked to remain silent for the sake of peace, and how loyalty may turn into a weapon rather than a shield. One thing is certain, whether or not people agree with Tamar. She had had enough of suffering in silence. Even though this case was agonizing, it was a turning point. Tamar made her own decision. She prioritized limits over custom, healing over image, and truth above comfort. And she paid a heavy price for that decision. However, it also rescued her, because sometimes the most painful betrayal isn't what occurs to you when you're a child. It's realizing as an adult that the individuals you thought would defend you were incapable of doing so. There is no satisfying conclusion to this tale. There's no flawless resolution, no tidy bow. One woman has finally had enough. Perhaps that's the true lesson. Not the lawsuit, not the news, but the reminder that families cannot be healed by quiet. Sincerity does. And up until then, since there is honesty, the suffering will continue to reverberate across generations. Consider Tamar's experience. She has spent her entire life attempting to recover from childhood trauma. When I finally spoke up, I was ordered to keep quiet and felt ignored. It felt like a rejection of her own truth to see her mother openly defend someone who was accused of damaging behavior. Revealing her essay attempt to the public before her family was even aware of it. Observing how her sisters responded to her suffering while filming a reality show. Being given a label every time she attempted to establish boundaries. She was erratic and dramatic. When does a person break? When is it necessary to sever links with the very individuals who are meant to keep you safe in order to survive? Her moment arrived for Tamar when she brought her case. The worst thing is that it didn't have to be this way when she declared, "I cannot heal in this environment." She put her own needs before her family's allegiance. If the family had put Tamar's recovery ahead of their reputation, if Evelyn had decided to believe her daughter, if someone had just said, "I hear you. Your suffering is important, and I believe you," perhaps that litigation will never take place. That family might remain intact. Perhaps Tamar doesn't have to decide between her mental health and her mother. However, it was not the case. We now have a broken family, a mother and daughter split apart by a lawsuit, and a lady who had to file a lawsuit against her own mother in order to be heard. Who is prepared to listen before it's too late, is the current question.